Blackout Nation. Written by Scott Medbury. Narrated by Adam Barr. Episode 5. Break and Run. Chapter 1. The Hunt. Marcus stood at the makeshift command center in the stadium's biggest corporate box, studying the bank of salvaged monitors. His arm throbbed where Mitchell's male companion had shot him, the pain a constant reminder of his failure to eliminate the man when he had the chance. They'd found Dr. Patel a few hours before, and after an hour of torture and questioning, all he'd revealed was that he and the group had escaped via a tunnel to the abandoned medical school and had sheltered there briefly before moving on. He'd had no idea where they were planning to go once he departed to seek out his wife. At least they had the skilled physician back. He would just need time to recover from his beating before he'd be useful again, and now they had his wife as leverage. Now, though, his lack of information didn't matter. They had been found. On the largest monitor, grainy drone footage played in a loop. 6 figures crossing beneath the Valley Street Bridge, using the supports for cover. "Someone's head is going to roll for this," he said quietly, his calm tone making the threat more chilling. "I want to know how they got past our bridge defenses." The guard captain shuffled nervously behind him. "Sir, there was an incident with some teenagers. It created a distraction." "A distraction?" Marcus turned slowly, his pale eyes fixing on the man. "You're telling me 6 people slipped past our strongest checkpoint because of some kids?" He moved with deliberate casualness, but everyone in the room tensed. "The same checkpoint I specifically ordered locked down." "Sir, we shot at them. We killed the teenagers. But we didn't realize—" "Replay it." Marcus cut him off, turning back to the monitors. The technician, a nervous man they'd found hiding in a radio shack, complied instantly. Marcus leaned closer as the grainy images flickered. "There. Freeze it." The image stopped on a frame showing 2 of the figures more clearly. Even in the low-quality footage, he could make out the movements of the man who'd shot him. Military training was obvious in every step. The woman beside him would be Sarah Mitchell, the combat medic whose file sat on his desk. His fingers unconsciously traced the bandage on his arm. "Sir?" Jensen appeared in the doorway, professional as always, despite the early hour. "Scout 3 drone reports they tracked them to Oakwood Heights. You lost visual when they entered a house. They are hovering in place now, but—" He hesitated slightly. "Spit it out." "We lost contact with Carter's patrol in that sector 3 days ago. 3 men, well-armed on foot, never reported back." Jensen shifted uncomfortably. "There could be another hostile group operating in that area. Maybe even remnants of that militia we broke up on the first day." Marcus absorbed this, his expression unchanging. "Any of the drones spotted anything like a militia or team operating there?" "No, sir. Only a few random sightings of scavengers. It's been quiet and uneventful, apart from the missing patrol." "Good. Then we can assume it isn't an organized group. Carter got careless and paid the price, probably killed by a couple of random survivors." He turned from the monitors. "We have their location. Get Thompson and Rodriguez. Full tactical gear. I'll lead you 3 in." "Sir, maybe we should send a larger force, if there are hostiles." "No." Marcus checked his rifle, the movement sharp with barely contained anger. "That bastard's smart. More men will mean more noise, more chance for them to slip away again. 4 of us only. 1 vehicle, quick and quiet. Let's get another drone up to monitor the area and a squad on the bridge. If it turns out there is another group, we'll use them as a backup." Jensen nodded, appeased, and disappeared to gather the men. Marcus studied the frozen image one last time, focusing on the man who'd shot him. The drones had been a stroke of luck, stolen military surplus, their circuits shielded against EMP effects. He'd acquired them for a cartel, pocketing a hefty fee, but when the attacks came, they were still sitting untouched in his dockside warehouse. The Humvees had taken more work, stripping out their modern electronics and replacing them with basic mechanical systems, old-school diesel injection, analog gauges, even retrofit generator systems that predated computerized engine management. The mechanics he'd captured on the first day had complained about the modifications at the time, but when he shot one in the head, they suddenly found a new appreciation for his approach to problem-solving and a much stronger work ethic. Thompson and Rodriguez were waiting in the corridor, already geared up. Both men had been a part of Marcus's gang before all this. They understood how he worked, how he thought. More importantly, they knew how to follow orders without question. "I still want the woman alive, but that man with her?" His voice hardened. "When we find them, you take Mitchell. But him? He's mine. No one touches him except me. The others?" He shrugged. "Collateral damage." The guard captain followed them to the vehicle bay, still trying to explain the lapse at the bridge. Marcus turned on him, his expression cold. "We'll discuss your failure when I return," he said quietly. "You better hope I find them quickly. It might improve my mood." He watched the color drain from the man's face before turning back to his team. "Mount up. We'll drive to the end of the bridge, then we're on foot. I want them to have no warning." The Humvee's engine rumbled to life. As they pulled out, Marcus watched the guard captain shrink in his rearview mirror. The man was still standing there, probably knowing his career, and maybe his life, hung on the outcome of this hunt. Marcus smiled faintly. The day was already improving. The afternoon sun cast harsh shadows through the boarded windows as the group faced Liam, knife gripped in his hand. Sarah had almost given up hope the confrontation could end in anything other than bloodshed, and kept herself between him and Devon, while Jake maintained his position near the door, watching their unstable host with growing concern.
"So you have a choice,"
Liam said, jabbing his finger at Jake and then at Pete.
"You leave, or you die."
He pushed his hair back, and Jake caught a glimpse of something on the back of his hand. Dark ink, partially obscured by dirt and grime, but unmistakable to anyone who'd spent time dealing with prison gangs. A small eagle, wings spread with an upside-down cross in its claws. The mark of the Iron Patriots, a ruthless, tightly knit faction that ruled over the Folsom prison yard. Jake felt pieces click into place. The too perfect control that had now cracked. The practiced movements, the tactical awareness. Not military training, prison yard survival skills. "How long were you in Folsom, Liam?" Jake asked quietly. The effect was instant. Liam froze mid-stride, his whole body tensing. Kaiser's ears flattened against his skull, picking up on his master's sudden shift in energy.
"What did you say?"
Liam's voice had dropped to a whisper. "The tattoo on your hand. I used to teach courses there." Jake kept his tone neutral, but his finger didn't relax on the trigger. "How long?"
10 years.
Liam's smile was terrible now, all pretense of normality gone.
"But that's not important. What's important is how you knew that. Who told you? Who sent you?"
His breathing quickened.
"You're with them, aren't you? All of you. I've seen the drones, always watching, Nobody sent us, Sarah said firmly. We're just trying to survive, same as you.
Liar! The word exploded from him. Jake capitalized on the distraction and began to raise his rifle. The dog launched itself at Jake with frightening speed, fangs bared. Jake barely had time to bring his rifle up crossways as 80 pounds of muscle and teeth slammed into him. They crashed to the floor together, Jake using the rifle as a bar to keep the snapping jaws from his throat. Sarah's Glock barked once, the sound deafening in the confined space. Kaiser yelped as the round caught him in the shoulder, but the wound only seemed to enrage him further. Jake felt hot breath on his face as the dog redoubled its efforts to tear out his throat. Liam howled in fury and lunged at Sarah, knife slashing. She ducked under his wild swing, but his backhand caught her across the face, sending her skidding across the floor. Maya screamed. Pete grabbed Devon and Rebecca, pulling them toward the kitchen. Liam rounded on Jake just as he managed to get his legs under the wounded dog, kicking it away. Kaiser hit the wall with a yelp, but immediately scrambled up, blood matting its fur. Before it could launch another attack, Sarah's second shot caught it in the chest. The dog collapsed, still snarling, but mortally wounded. "No!" Liam's scream was primal. He charged Jake, knife held low and professional. Prison yard training indeed. Jake met the charge with his own forward momentum, dropping his shoulder to absorb the impact. They crashed into the wall together, sending a shelf of supplies crashing down. The knife slashed across Jake's bicep, drawing blood, but he managed to trap Liam's knife hand against the wall. "You killed him!" Liam headbutted Jake, sending him staggering back. Sarah raised her Glock, but the two men were too entangled for a clear shot. She caught glimpses of the fight through the chaos. Jake blocking another knife thrust, Liam landing a solid punch to Jake's ribs, both men grappling for control of the blade. Pete had returned, gripping his baseball bat. "Jake, down!" Jake dropped, rolling away as Pete swung. The bat caught Liam in the shoulder, sending him stumbling. But instead of falling, Liam spun with terrifying speed, slashing out with the knife. Pete cried out as blood spread across his shirt, forcing him to retreat. Before Liam could turn back, Jake lunged, locking his arms around Liam's neck in a tight chokehold and driving him heavily to the floor. The knife slipped from Liam's hand, skittering under a cabinet. The ex-con thrashed wildly, his elbows smashing into Jake's nose. Pain exploded in Jake's head, and a cascade of stars danced across his vision. But he tightened his grip, and Liam slowly relaxed as he was starved of oxygen. "Sarah, the rope!" Jake shouted through gritted teeth. She grabbed the coil of thin rope they'd spotted earlier on a pile of Liam's supplies, quickly wrapping it around his wrists and pulling it tight before tying it into a slip knot. Jake loosened his grip and let Liam collapse to the floor. The man gasped for air, his chest heaving as he fought to catch his breath. Jake stood over him, but it appeared the fight had finally gone out of him. "Rebecca," Sarah called, keeping pressure on Pete's wound. "I need the first aid kit." Rebecca was already moving, medical supplies in hand. Devon stood in the kitchen doorway, his face pale but composed. Maya approached Kaiser cautiously. The dog's breathing was labored, each exhale bringing bloody bubbles. "He's dying," she said softly. "Leave him," Jake said, checking his nose. Not broken, but definitely bruised. Sarah pulled Pete's shirt away, examining the knife wound. "Clean slash across the chest, not too deep. Didn't even get as deep as the ribs. Might even get away without stitching as long as we bandage it well." Liam had gone quiet, staring at Kaiser's dying form with empty eyes. All his manic energy seemed to have drained away, leaving something hollow behind. Jake kept his rifle trained on him, while Sarah and Rebecca worked. "You don't understand," Liam said finally, his voice barely a whisper. "They're coming.
They're always coming. Had to be ready. Had to...
He's in shock, Rebecca said, helping Sarah with Pete's bandages. Probably been unstable for a while.
Since before the EMP, I'd guess, Jake agreed.
He touched his bleeding arm, wincing. Prison medical records would show psychiatric issues. Probably got released during the chaos. Sarah finished with Pete and moved to examine Jake's arm. She shook her head.
We got lucky again. Not too bad. Won't need stitches.
She cleaned the wound quickly, her touch professional, but gentle.
What do we do with him?
Before Jake could answer, Maya's voice cut through the tense silence.
Guys, there's a drone outside.
They all turned to where she stood at the window. Through a gap in the boards, they could see a small shape moving across the sky, its camera lens glinting in the afternoon sun.
Marcus,
Sarah breathed. Liam began to laugh, the sound high and broken.
See? They found you. I told you.
Jake met Sarah's eyes across the room. They both knew what the drone meant. Marcus wasn't far behind.
We need to move,
Jake said.
Now. We can't leave him tied up,
Sarah said, checking Pete's bandages one final time. The knife wound had stopped bleeding, but the edges were angry and red.
Not with Marcus coming.
Jake nodded grimly and cut Liam's bonds. The man didn't move at first, just stared at Kaiser's still form. Blood had spread in a dark pool around the dog, soaking into the worn carpet.
If you follow us,
Jake said quietly, I won't hesitate next time. Liam crawled to his dog, gathering the animal's head in his lap. All his earlier mania had drained away, leaving something broken behind.
Just go,
he whispered, not looking at them.
None of it matters now.
His fingers stroked Kaiser's blood-matted fur with terrible gentleness.
He was all I had left. The only one who understood.
They gathered their supplies quickly, working in practiced silence. Maya sketched possible escape routes in her notebook, while Pete tested his injured chest. It was sore, but not debilitating.
I'll be able to move just fine.
Devon stayed close to Sarah, helping her pack up the medical supplies.
Which way?
Rebecca asked, shouldering her pack. She distributed the heaviest items among those still uninjured, taking some of Pete's load herself. Jake studied Maya's maps. The girl had marked possible patrol routes, using her gaming experience to predict likely search patterns. Northeast. There's a ravine that'll give us cover. He glanced at Pete. Can you make it? Pete nodded tightly.
Yes. Maya,
Sarah called softly.
Time check.
The girl consulted her notebook.
23 minutes since we spotted the drone, if Marcus was nearby when it found us.
They didn't need her to finish. Time was running out. They filed out through the back door, Sarah taking a final look at Liam. He hadn't moved, still cradling his dead dog, mumbling something they couldn't hear. His knife lay within easy reach, and Sarah wondered if he'd use it on himself once they were gone. She closed the doors softly behind them. The autumn air felt thick with tension as they moved between houses, staying low and using whatever cover they could find. Dead leaves crunched beneath their feet, despite their best efforts at silence. Pete's injury didn't slow them. He kept pace without complaint, his face pale with determination.
I think the drone's gone,
said Maya. Maybe, said Jake. We'll take no chances, though. We'll stay under cover as much as possible. He had followed the Russia-Ukraine war carefully and had seen many examples of the lethality of combat drones. He suspected any drones Marcus had been able to utilize would be a lot more basic, but the fact was, they were hard to spot, and even harder to neutralize, and even as a spotter, were a real threat. For now, the drone seemed to have moved on, but he didn't allow himself to even hope that it was there randomly. He led them through backyards, darting from cover to cover, whether it be trees or structures. Maya brought up the rear, constantly checking their back trail. Devin stayed between Rebecca and Sarah, moving with the quiet focus they'd practiced. The boy hadn't spoken since the fight, but his eyes were alert, watching everything. Marcus approached Liam's house 15 minutes later, Thompson and Rodriguez flanking him while Jensen watched their 6. 20 minutes before, via radio, he'd ordered the drone withdrawn to a distance of 2,000 yards from the house so it wouldn't be spotted. He wanted nothing to spoil his surprise party. Unfortunately, while the drone operator had a visual of the house, it was grainy, and Jake's precautions meant he completely missed the group's departure. Marcus directed them into the backyard of the home next door, keeping the abandoned house between them and any line of sight from the target building. He called them to a halt, and they huddled by a gate set into the timber fence. "We'll breach through the rear," Marcus said. "Thompson, you take point. Rodriguez, you're second. Jensen and I will cover the flanks. Standard room clearing. Thompson and Rodriguez clear. Jensen and I secure. Questions?" They shook their heads. Marcus had drilled them on these tactics countless times since taking control. Each man knew his role. Thompson moved first, his rifle held ready as he approached the back door. The others followed in practiced formation, boots silent on the overgrown grass. At the door, they paused, listening intently. Nothing. No movement. No voices. Not even floorboards creaking. The house felt empty, but Marcus had learned never to trust feelings. After 30 seconds of silence, Marcus nodded to Thompson. The man tested the handle. Unlocked. Another bad sign. Thompson eased the door open, checking corners before stepping through. The first shot caught him in the throat as he crossed the threshold. He stumbled backward, blood spraying, as Liam emerged from behind the door like a ghost, knife already slashing toward Rodriguez. The ex-convict moved with the fluid grace of someone with nothing left to lose. "Contact!" Jensen opened fire, rounds tearing through the doorway. Liam dove back inside, taking Rodriguez's rifle with him. Thompson lay motionless on the porch, eyes staring at nothing, arterial blood pumping out with each slowing heartbeat. "Suppressing fire," Marcus ordered, moving to the side of the house. More shots rang out from inside. Liam had found a firing position behind an overturned table. Rodriguez cursed as a round clipped his shoulder, spinning him against the porch railing. The firefight was brief, but intense. Liam fought like a cornered animal, switching positions, using his prison yard cunning to deadly effect. He wounded Jensen with a thrown knife that seemed to come from nowhere, the blade embedding itself in the big man's thigh. In the end, superior firepower won out. When the shooting stopped, Rodriguez was bleeding heavily from his shoulder. Jensen was nursing his leg wound, and Liam lay dead in the living room, a few feet from his dead dog. His final expression was almost peaceful. Marcus kicked the rifles away from the stranger's body, his eyes widening at the familiar tattoo on the man's hand. He had one just like it. He surveyed the scene. Dead dog, coffee cups still damp from use, and the remains of hasty medical treatment littering the floor, bandages, antiseptic wipes, gauze. Something had gone down here, but he wasn't sure what. It didn't matter. He thumbed his walkie-talkie. "Get that drone closer. They're almost certainly headed into that ravine. Rodriguez, get that shoulder patched. Jensen, salvage what's left of Thompson's ammo, and let's go." He checked his magazine, still half full. "They're on foot. At least one of them is injured. They'll try to use the ravine for cover." Jensen nodded, checking his own weapon. Rodriguez started field dressing his wound, relieved, even though it hurt like a bitch, that it was only a flesh wound. "Sir," Jensen said quietly, looking at Thompson's body. "What about—" Marcus was already moving toward the back fence, following signs of recent passage through the overgrown yard. "Leave him. We'll retrieve the body after we finish this." His pale eyes scanned the ground, picking up their quarry's trail with ease. Blood and trampled grass marked their passing. "They're headed northeast, just like I said." He began pulling palings off the rear fence, noting the bloody handprint on the top. Jensen joined him and tended to his injured leg quickly and efficiently. The knife had fallen out before the bloody confrontation had concluded. Luckily, the blade had barely penetrated an inch. He tore the opening in his fatigues open further and stuck an adhesive gauze over it. Rodriguez joined them. He was pale, but gave Jensen a reassuring nod. "Flesh wound." The morning sun cast their shadows long across the autumn grass as they entered the next yard and began their hunt in earnest. Not limited by the need to hide from view, they made good time despite the injuries. Ahead lay the ravine, and beyond that, an interstate. Marcus smiled, feeling the familiar thrill of the chase. The group might have escaped his bridge checkpoint, but their luck had run out. This time, there would be nowhere left to run. Chapter 2. The Ravine. The ravine opened before them like a wound in the earth, its steep sides thick with fall vegetation. Jake studied the descent path, noting how recent rains had carved tiny rivulets into the dirt. One wrong step would send them sliding to the bottom. "Maya," he whispered, "what do you see?" The girl flipped through her notebook, comparing the terrain to her hand-drawn maps. "2 ways down," she said, tapping a page. She pointed to a worn trail that switchbacked down the slope. "Main path's there, but it's too exposed." Then she gestured toward a less obvious route winding through denser brush. "That one takes longer, but offers better cover." Sarah watched Pete try to hide a wince as he shifted his weight. The bandages across his chest were holding, but she could tell the wound was causing more pain than he admitted. "We take the covered route," she said. "Slower is safer." They began their descent in practiced order, Jake first, testing each step, then Devon, between Rebecca and Sarah, with Pete and Maya bringing up the rear. The vegetation provided good concealment, but made movement difficult. Thorns caught at their clothes, and loose stones threatened to give way under their feet. Devon handled the terrain better than some of the adults, his smaller size letting him duck under branches that others had to push through. Sarah felt a surge of pride at his quiet competence. He was learning, adapting, becoming stronger. Halfway down, Maya froze. "Wait," she breathed, barely audible. She pointed to a broken branch, its pale inner wood exposed. "Someone's been through here. Recently." Jake examined the break pattern. "Last day or two. Single person, moving fast." He glanced at Sarah. "Probably one of the locals. We've seen signs of scavengers." A familiar buzz made them all look up. Through gaps in the canopy, they could see the drone circling, but the thick foliage kept them hidden, for now. Sarah studied the drone through the branches, her military experience kicking in. It was an older model, the kind farmers had used for crop monitoring before more sophisticated versions took over. The simple analog control systems and mechanical servos would have survived the EMP that had fried more complex electronics. Marcus was clever. He'd obviously stripped down his vehicles the same way, replacing modern components with older, hardened technology. It explained how his men maintained their mobility advantage, while everyone else was on foot.
"They're searching systematically,"
Maya said, her voice tight.
"Grid pattern. Just like in—"
"Save it." Jake cut her off gently. "We need to move. Hopefully it doesn't, but if that thing's got infrared, this foliage won't hide our heat signatures." They pushed on, working their way deeper into the ravine. The temperature dropped as they descended, and the air grew thick with the smell of wet earth and rotting leaves. Pete's breathing had become labored, though he waved off Sarah's concerned look.
"Just need a minute,"
he gasped, leaning against a tree. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool air. Sarah checked his bandages while the others kept watch. No fresh blood, but the skin around the wound was hot to the touch. Early signs of infection, maybe. They'd need to find antibiotics soon. "I don't like this," Jake said quietly, studying the ravine ahead. "This terrain. It's perfect for an ambush. Too perfect."
"What do you mean?"
Rebecca asked, keeping one hand on Devon's shoulder. "Marcus will know we'll use the ravine for cover, which means he'll try to predict where we'll come out," Sarah finished. She'd seen similar tactics in Afghanistan, using terrain to channel enemies into killing zones. The drone's buzz grew louder, then faded again. They stayed motionless until the sound disappeared completely.
"We should rest,"
Sarah said, noting Pete's pallor.
"Just for a few minutes."
Jake shook his head. "Judging by how he found us at Liam's, every minute we stop is another minute he gains on us." Maya had her notebook out again, sketching rapidly.
"The ravine branches about half a mile ahead. If we take the eastern fork, it'll lead us toward—"
A sharp crack echoed through the ravine, a branch breaking somewhere behind them. Everyone froze, listening intently. Nothing followed, but the message was clear. They weren't alone.
"Time to move,"
Jake whispered.
"Maya, you're on point with me. Watch for signs anyone's passed through recently."
He glanced at Sarah.
"You okay with rear guard? Rebecca can stick close to Pete."
She nodded, already shifting her pack for better access to her Glock. The weight of the pistol was reassuring, but she counted their ammunition in her head. Not enough for a prolonged fight. They moved out again, slower now, every step carefully placed to avoid making noise. The ravine's walls pressed closer, limiting their options. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being herded, like sheep into a pen. Above them, beyond the canopy of leaves, the drone continued its patient search pattern. Sarah wondered if Marcus was watching their heat signatures right now, planning his next move. The thought made her quicken her pace slightly, urging the others forward into the deepening shadows of the ravine. Marcus kept a steady pace despite the terrain, letting Jensen range ahead while Rodriguez covered their rear. The shoulder Jake had shot days earlier ached, the pain feeding his focus. The trail wasn't hard to follow. 6 people moving quickly through dense vegetation left obvious signs. Broken branches, disturbed leaves, even an occasional footprint in the softer ground. One set of tracks was deeper than the others, someone carrying extra weight, or maybe injured.
"Sir,"
Jensen's voice crackled over the radio.
"Found fresh markings. Can't be more than 20 minutes ahead. And there's blood here. Looks like someone brushed against the branch."
That would be the one they'd wounded at Liam's house. Marcus smiled. Injuries slowed people down, made them desperate, made them make mistakes.
"Drone command, report position,"
he radioed.
"I spotted them briefly in the ravine," came the response. "Moving northeast,
approximately half-mile ahead of your position. The canopy is hiding them, but they're staying on the overgrown track." Marcus studied the map he'd decided to bring at the last minute, noting the ravine's course. Something clicked in his mind as he traced the route with his finger. The ravine track they were on ran parallel to an old maintenance road for nearly 2 miles before emptying out near the interstate. Their quarry would follow the track all the way, using the cover, but the maintenance road would let him bypass all that. He remembered a while back that his crew had used these maintenance roads for moving product without attracting attention. The police never patrolled them, and they connected to all the major routes out of the city. Now that knowledge would serve a different purpose. "They're being cautious," he said to Jensen as the man rejoined him. "Moving slow, staying hidden. But that ravine only goes one place." He pointed to his map. "See how it narrows here? Then opens up right at the interstate. Perfect kill zone." Jensen nodded, studying the map. "The interstate. That elevated section where it crosses the ravine." He traced the route with his finger. "They'll have nowhere to go when they hit that wall." "Exactly." He looked back at his other man. "Rodriguez, double back to the Humvee. Take the maintenance road past the old toll station. You know, the one we used to use. Set up where you can cover the ravine mouth." "Okay," Rodriguez replied. "The scenic overlook will give it the opening of the ravine. Perfect spot to keep them boxed in." "Good. I'm sending the second team to meet us there. We'll have them completely trapped when they emerge." Marcus smiled coldly. "Keep your radio close. When you hear us engage, don't let anyone double back your way." Marcus radioed base and ordered a second 5-man team to the same rendezvous, then smiled coldly as he checked his ammunition. The group was good. He'd give them that. The way they'd slipped past his bridge checkpoint proved that. But they were playing his game now, moving exactly where he wanted them. "Jensen," he said quietly, "let's make enough noise to keep them moving forward. I want them good and scared when they reach the interstate." He chambered around deliberately, letting the sound carry. "Fear makes people predictable." They continued their pursuit, no longer bothering to stay completely silent. Let their quarry hear them coming. Let them think speed was their only option. The ravine would do the rest, its steep walls funneling them exactly where he wanted them. Marcus's radio crackled again. "Drone command here. They've reached the narrow section, moving faster now. The injured one appears to be struggling." Perfect. Fear would make them sloppy, make them miss things, like the fact that their carefully chosen escape route was leading them straight into his hands, or how the ravine walls got steeper ahead, eliminating any way but up the slope to the interstate. 30 minutes later, he thumbed his radio again. "Rodriguez, status. Just picked up the Hummer. Should be in place 20-minute stops. They'll be completely exposed when they enter the cleared area at the end of the ravine. Want me to set up the M24? The sniper rifle. Marcus considered it, then shook his head. "No. Too quick. I want this up close and personal. Stay out of sight. I don't want them spooked into trying to double back if they realize it's a trap. Copy that. I'll be set up and waiting." Marcus allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The medic would be captured. The man who shot him would die, and he could then get back to business in the city. If the information they were picking up on shortwave was true, they only had a few days to set themselves up for the real fight. "Remember," he told Jensen as they walked, "we take Sarah Mitchell alive. The rest are expendable. But the one who shot me, he's mine." The drone buzzed overhead, its camera watching their prey run straight into his trap. Marcus checked his watch. Maybe an hour until they reached the interstate. An hour until he restored his authority, eliminated a threat, and acquired a valuable asset. All in all, not a bad day's work.
Sir,
Jensen said softly.
what about the kid with them?
Marcus didn't hesitate.
Collateral damage. The rules changed when they chose to resist.
His voice was cold, professional.
Now keep moving. I want to see their faces when they realize there's nowhere left to run.
The ravine walls had grown steeper, pressing in on both sides until they were forced to walk almost single file. Pete's breathing had become more labored, each step clearly causing pain, despite the pills Rebecca had given him. Maya kept checking her notebook, her earlier confidence replaced by growing concern.
Something's wrong, she whispered, falling back to walk beside Sarah. The way they're pushing us, it's like an aftermath when the AI herds players into...
She broke off as a stone clattered down the slope behind them.
They're not even trying to be quiet anymore, Jake said softly.
He'd noticed it too. Their pursuers wanted them to know they were being followed, wanted them moving forward. Sarah helped Pete over a fallen tree, noting how the bandages had started to spot with blood from the exertion.
We need to find a way out of this channel. Can't, Maya said,
pointing to the ravine walls.
Too steep now. And look.
She indicated marks on her map.
The walls keep getting higher still.
She traced the route with her finger.
Until what?
Rebecca asked, keeping Devon close.
Until it opens out onto the interstate. It's the only way, though.
Jake cursed softly.
He's pushing us exactly where he wants us.
He studied the walls, looking for any possible climbing point.
We need another option.
An engine sound in the distance echoed off the ravine walls, making them all freeze. Not from behind, where Marcus pursued, but ahead.
We're close to the interstate,
Jake said quietly.
That's where the ravine ends,
right at the old toll station.
No,
Sarah breathed.
He didn't just follow us, he
split his forces, Jake finished.
Sent someone ahead while he kept us moving forward. Someone, probably a team taking up position where the ravine opens onto the interstate.
His voice was tight with grudging respect.
You mean we're trapped?
Rebecca said. Maya was already studying her map, mind working frantically.
Maybe not. Look.
She pointed to a spot just before the ravine mouth.
There's a storm drain here. Maintenance access for the interstate's drainage system, if it's big enough.
The engine noise faded away, Marcus's men taking position.
How far to the drain?
Jake asked.
1/4 mile, but we'll be completely exposed for the last 100 yards where the ravine opens out.
Sarah touched her Glock, counting ammunition in her head. Not nearly enough for what was coming. She looked at Devon, saw the fear he was trying so hard to hide, and made a decision.
Pete, Rebecca, Maya, take Devon through the drain. Stay parallel to this track, but go through the brush, and then stop at the tree line. Jake and I will create a diversion, draw their attention. Don't make a run for the drain until you hear the shooting begin.
She kissed Devon's forehead quickly.
Stay with Rebecca, baby. Do exactly what she says.
Sarah. Jake started to protest.
You know it's the best chance. She cut him off. We're the only ones combat trained. We can keep them busy long enough for the others to slip through.
Another engine in the distance.
Aunt Sarah?
Devon's voice trembled.
It's okay, she said firmly. We'll be right behind you. Promise.
She met Rebecca's eyes, saw her friend understand what wasn't being said.
Go. Now.
They moved out, Pete gritting his teeth against the pain as they pushed into the trees and brush. Sarah watched until they disappeared, then turned to Jake.
Ready?
He checked his rifle.
Born ready,
he said, managing a tight smile. The sound of Marcus's team behind them grew closer, and the second engine faded into silence. Jake touched her arm briefly.
Come on. Let's give them hell. Together they began jogging along the trail, heading quickly toward the ravine mouth, where Marcus's trap waited. Sometimes, Sarah thought, the best way to deal with a trap was to spring it on your own terms. Chapter 3. No Way Out. Sarah moved silently through the ravine, scanning the rock faces rising on either side. Her fingers traced weathered stone as she counted paces, marking distances in her mind. Ahead, Jake crouched behind a fallen oak, checking sightlines through his scope. By now, Maya and the rest should be in place, waiting on the sound of a firefight to make their move. "Good position," she whispered, joining him and pointing up the slope to the right. "Natural choke point where the walls narrow. Plus, one of us can use that boulder cluster for cover." Jake nodded, eyes still on his scope. "We need to do it here, or we're in danger of being within range of the group on the interstate." His mouth quirked slightly. "This is really similar to an exercise I ran in Montana, teaching advanced tactics, except with considerably higher stakes." "Oh? And how did that end?" Sarah said, checking her Glock's magazine again. "It didn't. Had to cut it short when a student broke his leg trying to jump a creek." "Interesting. Let's hope this ends better." He lowered his scope and turned to her, his expression softening slightly. "You know, when this is over, I'd like to hear some of your war stories." "Bold of you to assume I have any. Combat medic with 3 tours? You've got stories. Maybe we could discuss them sometime. You know, assuming we survive the next hour." "Are you asking me on a date while we're setting up an ambush?" She smiled as a faint flush warmed his cheeks. He shrugged. "Seems as good a time as any." His hands moved with practiced efficiency as he divided their limited ammunition evenly. "You take the boulders. I'll set up on the other side." "And where exactly do you plan on taking me?" she said, pocketing a magazine and standing up. "Pretty sure all the nice restaurants are closed. End of the world and all that." "Well, I make a mean MRE casserole. Candles, maybe some scavenged wine." He paused at the sound of a stick breaking, about 50 feet behind them. Their eyes met, no words exchanged. He pointed 2 fingers toward the boulders Sarah had indicated earlier, then toward her. She nodded sharply, her movements fluid as she crouched low and darted for cover. She moved like a shadow, each step deliberate, avoiding loose rocks and brittle branches. Sliding into position behind the largest boulder, she pressed her back against it, her weapon at the ready. She didn't need to look to know Jake was already moving, keeping low as he slipped to his spot across the ravine. The forest was still, the usual hum of insects and rustling leaves conspicuously absent. Sarah scanned the area, her eyes sweeping the slope above. Her breaths were shallow, controlled, her heart steady, now that the familiar rhythm of preparation had taken over. Jake settled behind a jagged outcrop opposite her. From her position, she saw him ease into place, his rifle balanced against his shoulder. They met eyes again, his free hand flicking a quick signal. 2, closing in. Sarah responded in kind, pointing up the slope toward the narrowing walls, their agreed ambush spot. She caught a flicker of movement in the brush and froze, her Glock tracking the area. Jake shifted slightly, his rifle barrel angling toward the same spot. Sarah's finger tightened on the Glock's trigger, her other hand signaling to Jake. "Wait." He gave a slight nod, his focus unbroken. Sharp cracks echoed through the ravine, followed by the deeper sound of return fire. Maya grabbed Devon's hand. "Now, that's our signal." They burst from the tree line, Rebecca helping Pete as they scrambled up the loose screed toward the concrete drain opening. Sharp-edged stones shifted under their feet, sending small avalanches of gravel tumbling down behind them. The engineering aggregate,
Crushed granite and limestone, meant to prevent erosion, made every step treacherous.
Almost there,
Rebecca gasped, half carrying Pete as his injured chest heaved with effort. Blood had started to seep through his bandages again. The first shots from above took them completely by surprise. Sharp cracks, followed by impacts that kicked up stone chips around their feet.
Shots!
Maya yanked Devin along faster.
Up on the interstate.
Up there, Pete gasped, pointing to a figure moving along the interstate's guardrail.
Quick, he's trying to get a better angle.
Rebecca half-carried Pete between protective outcrops. Devin proved the most sure-footed, his lighter weight letting him practically dance across the unstable surface as Maya guided him. A bullet struck stone inches from them, sending fragments spinning. Maya pulled Devin tighter against her as they ran.
20 more yards,
she called back to the others. A stone turned under Pete's foot, and he stumbled, nearly pulling Rebecca down with him.
Leave me, he wheezed. I'm slowing you down. Not happening.
Rebecca's voice was steel. She hitched his arm higher across her shoulders as rounds impacted around them.
Maya, get Devin up there. We're right behind you.
The drain loomed above them now, its concrete mouth dark against the earthen slope. Maya boosted Devin up onto the lip, then turned back to help with Pete. A burst of automatic fire sent chips of concrete flying from the drain's edge, but the angle was wrong for Rodriguez to get a clean shot into the opening. Together, Maya and Rebecca half-dragged Pete the final few yards until they all collapsed inside the tunnel, chests heaving. Water trickled somewhere in the darkness. The concrete felt cool against their backs as they caught their breath, the sounds of the two-sided battle echoing strangely through the drain's acoustics. Devin pressed against Rebecca, his small body trembling.
Aunt Sarah,
he whispered.
She'll be here soon,
Rebecca assured him, though her voice hitched slightly.
She and Jake just need to keep the bad men busy for a little while. I'm going to see where this leads,
said Maya, standing up.
Be careful, said Rebecca. Don't go too far.
Maya grinned, clearly energized by the life-and-death situation they'd just escaped.
Okay, back soon.
They watched her disappear into the dimness of the tunnel. Another burst of gunfire from above made them all jump. Rodriguez's team was still trying to find an angle into the drain. Pete tried to sit up straighter, wincing.
How long do we wait?
Rebecca checked his bandages, her hands steady despite everything.
As long as it takes. Sarah will find us.
She finished her checks and kissed the top of Devin's head, thankful he couldn't see the doubt in her eyes. They huddled in the darkness, listening to the battle raging on two fronts, each of them trying not to think about what would happen if Sarah and Jake didn't make it. The drain's concrete walls felt both like a shelter and a tomb, and the waiting was almost worse than the climb had been. Almost, but not quite. The crack of Sarah's Glock was the opening note of chaos. Her shot went wide intentionally, ricocheting off a rock near Marcus and Jensen's position to draw their attention. Jake followed with two carefully aimed shots, the rapid cracks of his rifle echoing through the ravine. One round struck the dirt near Marcus, forcing him to duck behind a fallen log. The second found its mark. Jensen cried out, clutching his upper arm as blood blossomed through his sleeve. Sarah shifted her position behind the boulders, tracking Jensen as he scrambled for cover. Her shots were measured and deliberate, buying Jake time to reposition. The pair moved with practiced precision, Jake's survivalist skills and Sarah's military training merging in an unlikely fluidity. Jake's rifle barked again, keeping Marcus pinned as Sarah darted to a new vantage point. She caught his eye and gave a quick nod, understanding his intent without the need for words. Marcus, however, wasn't one to panic. He barked orders to Rodriguez, who began laying down suppressing fire from above. Bullets peppered the boulders Sarah hid behind, sending chips of stone flying. One shard caught her just above the collarbone, slicing through her jacket and into her skin. The sharp pain made her hiss, but she didn't falter. Jake noticed the crimson blooming on her jacket as she shifted to reload.
You hit?"
he called. Sarah pressed her hand to the wound to staunch the bleeding and gave Jake the thumbs up. Marcus and the injured Jensen had gone to ground, but Jake knew their adversary would probably call down for reinforcements from the interstate. He fired a burst in their direction, not expecting to hit anyone, but hoping to make them think twice about advancing. He caught Sarah's eye and made a cutting motion across his throat and pointed back towards the drain, still 200 yards distant. She nodded grimly, holding up her hand where he could see it. 3 fingers extended. Her blood-stained hand trembled slightly as she counted down. 2. 1. Marcus's voice rang out just as her final finger dropped. "Drop your weapons and come out with your hands up, or you'll be more than hit." Jake's rifle barked in response, and they began running. They moved separately to avoid becoming easy targets. Jake signaled for Sarah to hold just before they emerged from cover, his rifle shifting toward the platform overlooking the ravine. He took a steady breath, then opened fire, the sharp cracks of his shots forcing the men stationed above to duck for cover. Dust and debris exploded from the concrete barrier as bullets struck home. "Go!" he yelled, keeping his aim locked on the overlook. "I'll keep them busy." Sarah didn't hesitate. She pushed off from her position, sprinting for the open ground leading to the drain. But as her boot hit the loose scree, the ground betrayed her. Gravel shifted beneath her weight, and she slid, barely managing to keep her balance. Just as she steadied herself, a round from Rodriguez's position struck the rocks near her feet, sending a fresh spray of debris into the air. She fell hard to one knee, pain flaring through her wounded shoulder as she hit the ground. Before she could push herself up, Jake was there, gripping her arm and yanking her behind the nearest outcrop. Bullets ricocheted off the rocks around them, the gunfire relentless. "Stay down," he ordered, his tone sharp but controlled. She barely had time to catch her breath before he shifted, lining up his next shot. His rifle cracked again, and someone on the platform let out a pained scream. "Don't harm the woman," a voice yelled behind them. Marcus. The return fire faltered. For the briefest moment, silence settled over the battlefield. A low rumble vibrated through the ground. Distant at first, but quickly growing into something undeniable. Heavy vehicles. Fast-moving. Powerful. From the interstate above, Marcus's men started shouting. "What the hell is that?" Rodriguez's voice crackled through Marcus's radio. "Sir, we've got 2 trucks inbound. Modern builds, no markings. Front one's got a machine gun turret. Wait! Oh shit, it's the goddamn Russians!" Marcus cursed under his breath. "Get off the interstate! Get down here and help me round up the fugitives before—" Gunfire erupted from the turnpike. One of Marcus's men had panicked and opened fire. "You goddamn idiots!" Marcus bellowed, but the damage was done. Sarah's mind raced as realization struck. Russians. Maya's parents taken as translators. Marcus's increasingly desperate hunt for medical personnel. The well-equipped force above them now. It wasn't just about taking the city. Marcus had been preparing for something bigger. He knew who was behind the EMP attack. A deep thud, thud, thud filled the air and echoed in the ravine as a heavy weapon let loose, sending high-caliber rounds slamming into the overpass. Concrete exploded, shrapnel raining down into the ravine. Jake didn't wait. He grabbed Sarah's good arm and hauled her forward. "Move!" She staggered but kept going, her wounded shoulder throwing off her balance as they sprinted toward the drain. Above them, the firefight intensified as Marcus's men were caught between the fury of the Russian gunfire and their original mission. Sarah stumbled toward the drain entrance, her shoulders screaming in protest with each step. Fresh blood trickled down her collarbone, hot against her cold skin. Behind her, Jake watched Marcus's men scrambling off the platform and scurrying, half falling down the treacherous embankment. "Go!" Jake shouted, his rifle methodically picking targets. "Jake!" She started to turn back, unwilling to leave him alone against both threats. "Don't argue! Devin needs you!" His rifle barked, sending someone diving for cover. "I'll make sure no one follows.
If you don't hear from me within 10 minutes, move on." Their eyes met for a moment. So much left unsaid. Jake's face was streaked with dirt and gunpowder residue, but his eyes were clear and determined. Sarah gritted her teeth and plunged into the darkness. Each movement sent fresh waves of pain through her shoulder. The wound wasn't deep, but blood soaked her shirt, and she could feel her arm growing weaker. Her medical training told her she needed stitches, but that would have to wait. The temperature dropped immediately, and the sounds of battle became muffled and strange, as if happening underwater. Water splashed under her boots as she moved deeper, one hand trailing along the cold wall for guidance, while the other pressed against her wounded shoulder. "Rebecca," she called softly, voice tight with pain. "Devon." Nothing but the echo of dripping water. Her heart rate kicked up. The drain should have been straight, but somehow she'd lost them. The wound in her shoulder throbbed in time with her pulse as she pressed forward, fighting rising panic. Had they gone the wrong way? Been caught somehow? "Maya!" Her whisper bounced off concrete walls, coming back distorted. The sounds of combat grew more distant, then changed pitch. The fight had moved from the overpass and into the ravine. She could hear the distinctive thud of the Russian's heavy weapon, followed by the sharper cracks of small arms fire. A hand touched her arm as she spun, Glock half raised, finger already tightening on the trigger. "It's me!" Maya's whispered voice came from a side passage she hadn't noticed, hidden behind a concrete support. "Quick!" Sarah followed the girl's tugging, rounding a corner into what felt like a maintenance junction. As her eyes adjusted to the deeper darkness, she made out familiar shapes in the gloom. Rebecca holding Devon, Pete propped against the wall, his bandages gleaming faintly in what little light filtered down from a grate above. "Aunt Sarah!" Devon's arms wrapped around her waist. She bit back a gasp as he pressed against her wound. "Shh," she whispered, hugging him tight despite the pain. "We need to stay quiet. We're not safe yet." Above them, the battle reached a crescendo. Someone screamed, the sound cutting off abruptly. A staccato burst of automatic weapons fire penetrated the concrete and rock. Not from above, but from the ravine slope. Sarah pressed Devon tighter against her, as Russian voices called out sharp commands. The sounds of combat intensified, punctuated by screams. A voice shouted in Russian, and the thud, thud, thud of a heavy weapon caused dust to fall on their heads. Then, silence. Chapter 4. Crunch Time. Jake pressed himself deeper into the brush as two Russians moved past his position. Their gear was top tier, modern plate carriers, thermal optics, encrypted comms. They had decimated the group from the overpass, and it looked like they were now doing a sweep to make sure there was no further threat. Through gaps in the foliage, movement caught his eye on the other side of the track. It was the man that had been stalking them with Marcus. A Russian was about 20 feet away and closing toward him. There was no sign of Marcus. Suddenly, the man popped up and made a desperate sprint toward deeper cover on Jake's side of the track, perhaps hoping to regroup. The Russian gunner cut him down mid-stride, the heavy rounds practically tearing him in half. Jake shook his head at the man's misfortune and was about to retreat further when a ring of cold steel pressed against the back of his head. He froze. "Put it on the ground," Marcus hissed. "Slowly." Jake put his rifle down and put his hands out in front of him. "You really think you have time for this?" he whispered. "Shut up." Marcus's voice was tight with barely controlled rage. Boots crunched on gravel nearby, more Russians moving into the ravine. "Your men are dead," Jake said quietly, "and you're about to have bigger problems than me." "Because of you." The gun pressed harder.
You and that medic. I had everything under control. The city was mine." A burst of automatic fire made them both flinch. Close, maybe 50 yards away, Russian voices called out commands. "You have maybe 30 seconds," Jake said, "before they reach this position. Your choice. Kill me and die, or live to fight another day." Marcus's breathing was ragged, his gun hand trembling slightly. Jake could feel the man's tension, the war between vengeance and survival. "You shot me," Marcus snarled. "You have to die for it." But his eyes kept darting toward the sound of approaching boots. 20 seconds, Jake said. "Choose." For a moment, he thought Marcus would pull the trigger anyway, would let his need for revenge override his survival instinct. The muzzle pressed harder, then suddenly lifted away. "This isn't over," Marcus breathed. "I'll find you both. And next time, 10 seconds. Marcus melted into the brush without another word. Jake stayed frozen, counting heartbeats as 2 Russian soldiers moved past his position. They wore no unit patches, no identifying marks. Their weapons were spotless, professional. They paused, checking Jensen's body, speaking rapid-fire Russian into their comms. One pointed, noting signs of Marcus's passage. They moved off in pursuit, weapons ready. Jake retrieved his rifle, checking it quickly. Marcus was too dangerous to let escape, too capable. He'd only come back stronger, with more men, more resources, and he'd never stop hunting Sarah. The Russians had Marcus's trail. All Jake had to do was follow them until they flushed him out. Keeping low, he began shadowing the hunters, letting them lead him to his prey.
"How long has it been?"
Maya whispered, her voice echoing softly in the concrete tunnel. Sarah checked her watch in the dim light filtering through the grate.
12 minutes.
Her heart clenched. Jake had been clear about waiting only 10. She fought down the urge to go back, to look for him. The gunfire had died away several minutes ago, leaving only occasional shouts in Russian and the sound of boots on concrete above.
"We need to move,"
Rebecca said gently, though her eyes were full of sympathy. Pete shifted against the wall, wincing.
"She's right. If he made it..."
He left the rest unsaid. Maya returned after a short expedition.
"I think I know a way," she said. "There's a main junction ahead where multiple tunnels branch off. One looks like it leads all the way under the interstate. Aunt Sarah?"
Devon's small hand found hers in the darkness.
"Can we wait just a little longer?"
She squeezed his fingers, swallowing hard.
"We can't, sweetie," she said,
forcing her voice to stay steady.
"He wouldn't want us risking everyone by staying too long. The Russians are still up there,"
Maya added quietly.
"I heard them calling out when I moved past one of the vertical shafts."
Sarah took a steadying breath, finally letting the possibility of Jake's demise enter her mind.
"We'll go that way. Maya, lead the way. Everyone stay close and quiet."
They moved deeper into the tunnel system, Rebecca helping Pete while Sarah kept Devon between them. The sound of water dripping echoed off concrete walls, masking their footsteps. Sarah tried not to think about what might have happened above ground, about Jake facing both Marcus and the Russians, alone. She did a quick mental inventory as they moved. 8 rounds left in her Glock's magazine, plus the spare, with 12 more. Rebecca had the medical supplies split between 2 packs, enough for maybe 3 more dressing changes for Pete. 2 water bottles each, protein bars, Maya's carefully hoarded cookies. Not enough for a long journey, but maybe enough to keep them going for a day and a half, if they were careful.
Finally, she let her mind go back to Jake. He was a survivor. Of that there was no doubt. She just had to trust that if he was alive, he would catch up or make his way to the safe haven. The Russians moved with practiced efficiency, following Marcus's trail through the ravine. Every movement spoke of professional training. The way they checked corners, maintained spacing, swept their sectors. Jake kept his distance, using their focus on tracking to mask his own movement through the dense undergrowth. He had 3 magazines left, 12 rounds each. Not enough for a prolonged fight, but he had no intention of engaging them directly. This pursuit's sole purpose was to make sure that Marcus did not make it out of the ravine alive. Late afternoon sun slanted through the trees, casting confusing shadows. The lead Russian raised his fist suddenly, a signal to halt. He'd found something. A boot print on the soft edge of a mud patch. Jake crouched, suddenly alert. Marcus was too good to leave such an obvious trail. This wasn't carelessness. It was bait. The thought had barely formed when steel sliced through shadow, a lethal glint in the dying light. A knife struck the rear soldier's throat, the force of the throw burying it to the hilt just above his body armor. He went down without a sound, hands clutching uselessly at the blade, eyes wide with surprise. Blood pulsed between his fingers as he tried to breathe. His partner spun toward the sound of the body falling, weapon half raised. "Dmitri?" The brush to his left exploded, and Marcus charged at him, a fist-sized rock gripped in his hand. The Russian never had time to bring his weapon to bear. The first blow caught him in the temple, knocking him to his knees. The second caved the top of his head in, and nerveless fingers dropped the rifle as his body slumped to the ground. More blows followed. Marcus's first 2 strikes had been savage, but efficient. Prison yard violence refined by years of practice. The ones that followed were pure, blind fury. When the fury that had consumed him finally ebbed, he stood over the lifeless body, his chest heaving, hands slick with blood and the rock still clenched in his right fist. He spat on the dead man before reaching for his rifle. He moved to pick up the rifle when a metallic click behind him froze him in place. "That's far enough." Marcus's shoulders slumped, and he looked at the sky, as if for answers before raising his hands. He knew who it was without turning. Marcus's shoulders sagged, and he tipped his head back, staring at the sky as if it might offer an answer. With a slow exhale, he lifted his hands. "I let you live back there," he said over his shoulder. "You did?" Jake's aim didn't waver. "Because you had no choice. And now I have nothing left. No weapons, no men. Back in the city, though," he said thoughtfully. "What do you say we do a deal? Work together. Get back there before the Russians are at full strength. You'll kill me the first chance you get." Marcus chuckled. "Yes, I would. That's why this has to end here. Are you going to shoot me in the back like a coward? At least look me in the eye." "Fine. Turn around." Marcus turned slowly, his eyes locking onto Jake's, a smirk playing at the corner of his bloodied lips. The rock was still in his fist, slick with crimson, fingers tightening around it. Jake's grip on the rifle never wavered. His finger rested on the trigger, steady. For a beat, neither moved. Then Marcus lunged, his arms snapping forward, the rock a blur in the dim light. Jake fired. Epilogue. The cornfield whispered around them as they moved carefully between the rows, stalks rustling against their clothes.
They'd emerged from the drainage system nearly 10 minutes ago, finding themselves in a culvert near a dirt road, a half a mile from the interstate. Maya's navigation through the tunnels had been flawless, leading them away from the sounds of Russian vehicles and voices until they'd finally seen daylight. The dirt road bordered an expanse of cornfields, and Sarah had wasted no time ushering them into the dense rows, an ideal hiding place from anyone looking in this direction from the elevated stretch of interstate they'd left behind. They had spotted a farmhouse in the distance, its weathered walls promising shelter. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the corn, and the air smelled of earth and growing things, so different from the dank concrete they'd left behind. Devon walked beside her, his small hand clutched in hers, while Pete followed with Rebecca supporting him. His breathing had steadied, but the wound needed proper treatment soon. A distant gunshot, the first in a long time, echoed across the fields. None followed. Sarah turned back toward the interstate, now hidden behind the endless rows of corn. One shot. A clean end to something, or the beginning of more violence? There was no way to know. She thought of Jake's last words to her in the drain. 10 minutes, then keep moving, no matter what. Had he known even then how this would end?
Come on,
Rebecca said softly, reading the pain in her friend's face.
we need to reach that house before dark.
Sarah squeezed Devon's hand and kept moving. Whatever had happened back there was done. She had to focus on the living, on getting these people to the safe haven in Ohio. Her free hand found the St. Raphael pendant hanging from her neck, a gift from her mother when she completed her medical training. She held it tight as they walked into the deepening shadows of evening. The corn whispered around them, as if keeping their secrets, as the sun sank toward the horizon. The end of Episode 5.
Hi everyone, Adam here. That's the end of Episode 5, Break and Run, and wraps up Season 1 of Blackout Nation. We hope you enjoyed it, and if you want to see more of this, comment below with the words "more please," so Scott will know that you'll be there for a Season 2. Oh, and of course, liking the video and subscribing to the channel always helps. By the way, I wanted to let you know that very soon I'll be beginning the narration of Book 12 of the America Falls series, Battlefront. This is the series that started it all for my collaboration with Scott, and I just love these characters and coming back to them as they make their way through these troubled times. So keep an eye out for it. I'm Adam Barr. Thanks for listening and watching.